What is up, everyone, and welcome to the second book discussion in this series. As always, you can find my book in the description below, the link to it. It's at 7 chapters. The 8th chapter is due to come tomorrow as of the recording of this video. Now, before I go any further, I want to state that I for the sake of these discussions, I can't keep the video spoiler free. So again, listen at your own peril to all of the discussion points over here, because there is quite a bit over here that is going to be spoiled if you have not yet started reading the book. But anyway, let's move on. There was quite a bit of interesting discussion with Bravo Mike and Abaddon and others on Discord. Interesting comments and questions, and it's very nice to read people's comments and thoughts on the story, because they usually point out things that you don't, from a different perspective, they don't realize. Now, Bravo Mike had a bit of a question about, the bones of all towns. How there's a bit of a question, and I kind of expected this, of how there can be all these deserted towns only a day's ride or 2 days ride away from relatively populated areas and in Ordon, where Gnarl is freeing from. And I kind of deliberately, this was another later edition. The original chase scene, the original chase and flight from the Glartholians was a lot simpler, was a lot more straightforward. You pretty much jump from, in the original version, from the work site in Varma all the way to Seren. There was the bridge. There was no bridge encounter. There was only an encounter at the gates at Varma. So the bridge encounter was added later. The travel through the bones of old towns was added later. I did this for a couple of reasons. There was the fact that I wanted to make the chase, I wanted to make the Glartholians seem more competent on the chase, and I also wanted it to seem more challenging for Nodal and Yelom. And secondly, it's also hearkening to a certain feature or a certain theme of Arabic stories and Arabic poetry called the Atolal, which is basically a description of ruins. So the poem would normally start with someone traveling through ruins and talking about things like loss or reminiscing about the past or old memories. So we have this scene over here. It's not directly called that, but it's if you're well versed enough in Arabic poetry, you can probably see where you would probably spot the inspiration rather quickly. And coincidentally enough, funnily enough, during this segment, Nodal and Yelom, as they're camping near these ruins, we get a bit of a history lesson from Nodal. And in this, there's also a third thing going on in this scene, which is that we get to see the contrast between Nodal and Yelom in terms of their hopefulness or in terms of their calmness, whereas Yelom is very hopeful when things are boring, when things before crap has hit the fan. He's very hopeful. When he's put under pressure, it's the reverse. It's Nodal who keeps a cool head under pressure, while Yelom tends to fall into despair rather quickly. Another part over here that was added was the field burning segment, and this is another one of those scenes where I wanted to make it very clear that Nodal is not exactly a morally righteous character. I mean, from a modern audience's perspective, he would not be morally righteous, but from his perspective, might makes right. He was wronged, so there is one segment over here that Mike pointed out regarding Nodal's hypocrisy, where he says, when a raider speaks of a savage, he speaks of savages hiding behind grasses or grass blades or hiding in the wild. And of course, there's a question of a raider like Nodal who steals, who has taken up a life of adventure and theft, talking about savages. What exactly does he imagine a savage is from his perspective? And this is his hypocrisy, and it's also another reference to Arabic poetry, where it's very common. It's a very common narrative device in Arabic poetry, where you tend to vilify or demonize your opponent for doing the same things you're doing. You're characterized as being brave, and that's usually done with comparisons or using the imagery of animals that are associated with bravery, so like lions, or animals that are associated with cunning, like foxes. And meanwhile, your opponent, who's doing the exact same thing, they have imagery attached to them, such as hyenas or vultures or donkeys, not exact animals that aren't exactly considered positive imagery when you're associated with them. And Abaddon pointed that out, and he said he quite likes, and this is a very intentional feature of the narration, he quite likes how the narrator is not trying to be objective. He's very clearly biased towards certain people in the story, and I wanted to write this not as a matter-of-fact kind of historical document. I wanted to write this as if you were reading a piece of folklore or something, or reading a piece of folk history, and you can really see the biases of the author cheering the protagonist, who is the protagonist from his perspective, against his antagonists. But when you read between the lines and you see how they're actually behaving, you're seeing how their actions are being framed strangely. Rules for me and rules for thee, you know, like it's and it's a narrative device that does not go away in the rest of the story. In fact, it probably becomes more prominent, especially in the later chapters of the book. When it comes to burial rites, Mike was a bit confused that Yelom was even being buried at all, because it was common in a lot of cultures to just cremate people, and especially because he's like, well, if they're nomadic and whatever, they might not have burial rites, or they might not bury their dead. But I didn't even consciously consider that. That wasn't a conscious decision on my part to make it burial instead of cremation. It's just like the thing that I know, and I just included it in the story. On the topic of them being nomadic, they're not. I mean, we haven't been, I know we have not been properly introduced to the Kureman Gnarls people yet. We will be in the next chapter that's dropping tomorrow. But they are not, in fact, nomadic. They're semi-nomadic. I know a lot of their poetry or a lot of their stories are dealing with nomadic figures for the most part, but that's because while they're in the transition to becoming a more sedentary people, they still keep in touch with their oral traditions. And that's also something very common in Arabic history. It was common, most of the well-known poets of Arabic history who were writing poetry on tribal warfare were actually city dwellers, but they were romanticizing tribal warfare. And that's another dynamic in this. You'll notice that they're always talking about tribal warfare and all these values that they don't even uphold in their current day, in the current time of peace. So that was also, so you'll see that in the next chapter. And that leaves us to talk about, well, what's next for the story. Chapter 8 is going to come out, and chapter 8 is the first proper introduction to the Kureman. We will meet with the Iktar tribe, which, if you've been paying attention to the story, which I'm sure you have been, they are descendants, or supposed descendants, of the legendary Ghawa al-Iktar from that little story within the story we had earlier in chapter 3. And they seem, when you see their interactions with Nodal, his half-brothers, his very envious and greedy half-brothers, you might see some parallels between them. Maybe the blood of Ghawa al-Iktar does run in them, who knows? If not, his character certainly does. So we'll be introduced to them. We'll see a bit of some old tension showing up, rearing its head between them and Nodal, which will be expanded upon later in the story in later chapters. And chapter 8 is also going to be the final chapter in this act 1, account number 1. This is going to be chapter 1.8, so the next chapter is going to be after that. The publishing schedule isn't changing. It's just that the next chapter is going to be numbered 2.1, and the whole second act of the story is going to be almost completely based at home, Nodal dealing with his people, navigating their politics. So thank you so much for watching, guys. Again, the link to the story is in the description. If you do read, please take the time to leave some comments on the Royal Road page, a review, an honest review. I don't mind if you have criticism, but I just want to have some activity on the page at least to get more attention. And also you can join Discord, links in the description below, and there's the dedicated literature channel for all discussions. You can keep up to date on all the stuff. I've also commissioned some art for the book for a few chapters, the first piece of which will be, hopefully it displays properly tomorrow when the chapter goes live. And there's going to be a few of those, and I've shared those in the literature channel on Discord. So thank you so much for watching, guys. Thank you so much to all of you who've been reading the book and have been giving your comments and contributing to the discussion. And I hope to see you all in the next video. Bye bye.